Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches, Makkos, Daf Beis, Baruch Hashem, a new Masechta, starting fresh on Daf Beis. Right at the top, as a background, we've learned about Eidim Zomamin before. Eidim Zomamin are witnesses who give testimony, and then others come in and say, you can't be Eidim, because as the classic claim goes, Imanu Hayisem. You want to testify that Reuven killed Shimon on Tuesday at 9 a.m. You were with me in jury duty at that time. That is not a possibility. So that's what the classic case of Imanu Hayisem is. And our Mishnah is actually going to find some exclusions where Imanu Hayisem is claimed, and the people become Eidim Zomamin, but they don't get the classical punishment. So let's get started with the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Keitzad Eidim Na'asim Zomamin. How is it that we could have a case of Eidim Zomamin? And we'll see soon. The Gemara is going to now, the Mishnah is going to give a backwards answer. The Gemara says, Mi'idan anu bi'ish ploni shu ben gerusha o ben chalutza. Says the Gemara that let's say that a person gives testimony about, let's say we have a set of Eidim, we have Reuven and Shimon giving testimony about Chaim the Kohen. It says the Gemara, Me'idan anu bi'ish ploni, we're saying about Chaim the Kohen, shehu ben gerusha o ben chalutza. He is the child of someone who is of a Kohen who married a woman he should not have married, and he's the product of that. In other words, if there is a Kohen who has a child with a woman with whom he's not supposed to, the child that's born is what's called a chalal. For all intents and purposes, he's not a Kohen. He can't serve in the Beis HaMikdash. He won't get the first Aliyah. He's basically not a Kohen. So if Eidim come in and say that Chaim is the result of his father's a Kohen who married a Grusha or a Chalutza, and he's the Ben Grusha, he's a Chalal, well, what would we assume about Eidim Zomamin? Wouldn't we then assume that the Eidim Zomamin should have the punishment of becoming a Chalal? Says the Mishnah, no. Ein omrim ya'aseh ben Grusha ben Chalutza tachtov. An Eid Zomim who tries to make someone into a Chalal, he's lying. He's an Eid Zomim, he's caught red-handed. But even though he tried to make someone into a Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza, the halacha is he doesn't get that punishment. It's an exception to the rule. And rather, elaloke arboim, the Eidim Zomamin in this case will get Makkos instead of the anticipated punishment. We'll learn why in the Gemara. That's case number one of the Mishnah, where the Eidim speak to they lie. The Eidim give a testimony that Chaim is the child of an illicit relationship that a Kohen had. And they were lying. They got caught, good, but they don't end up becoming a Chalal, even though that's what they wanted to do, but rather they get Makkos. Here's the second case of our Mishnah. Mi'idan anu bi'ish ploni shu chayav legalos. That a person testified, let's say again, Reuven and Shimon testify that Chaim killed someone b'shogeg. And in Torah law, when a person kills someone b'shogeg, they have to go to what's called an ir miklad. And what we'll refer to in our Gemara is going to galus. Of course, the word galus means going to exile. And what it means in context is that they're going to go to this city and they have to stay there until the Kohen Gadol dies. We'll learn more about that in a later prakim here. Says the Gemara, if I give testimony about Chaim, that he killed B'shogeg and he needs to go to an Ir Miklat, I'm lying, but that's what my claim is as a pair of Eidim. So then what punishment do I get when I'm caught? Okay, so Reuven and Shimon, you lied. You said that Chaim should have gone to Galus. So normally the rules of Eidim Zomamin is that if you lie, you get the punishment that you tried to give to the other person. Yet here, Ein Omrim Yigal Zetachta Veloloke Arbaim. So that's the end of the Mishnah with two exceptions to the rule. The Gemara later is going to teach us that there are more exceptions to the rule where the Eidim Zomamin don't get the punishment that they tried to give out in their false testimony. We saw two. We see that it's true by the case of claiming that a Kohen is a Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza, and we see that it's true in regards to the case of Galus. The Gemara opens with a very important question because really the Mishnah is not framed properly. The way the Mishnah started was, how do you make Eidim Zomamin? And instead of giving me a typical answer, the Gemara gives me exceptions to the rule. If you're going to tell me what Eidim Zomamin are, give me the prototype case. Give me the obvious case where it's so simple. I tried to get this person, I lied, I'm Eidim Zomamin, Reuven and Shimon, we lied. We tried to get the person to be guilty. We failed. Okay, we get his punishment. Instead, you give me exceptions to the rules. It says the Gemara, opening at the Gemara 7 lines down on Beis Aleph. Hold on one second. Ketzad ein ha'edim nasin zomamin miboile. The language of the Mishnah should have been, how do we not make classical Eidim Zomim. That would have been a better framing, because at the end of the day, it's more accurate. But Odin, furthermore, we have another conundrum, and that is, Midikatani Lekaman. We have a Mishnah a little bit later on, just 4 blot away on Daf Hey, 3 blot away. Says the Gemara, what does it say over there? Aval Amru Lahem, Heichatem Me'idim. Says the Gemara, based on a Mishnah later, how can you be testifying? After all, Sheharei be'oso hayom atem ha'isem imanu b'makom ploni. The Mishnah on Daf Hey says, hey, hold on one second. We know what Eidim Zomimin are. The Mishnah on Daf Hey tells us exactly what Eidim Zomimin are. So why is it that we need our case? Harei Eidu Zomimin. So again, our Mishnah doubly doesn't make sense, because our Mishnah says, how do you make Eidim Zomimin? It should have said, how do you not make Eidim Zomimin? And even if the question was right, it was answered on Daf Hey and not over here in the Mishnah on Daf Hey. Skip the parentheses, about a third of the way down, a little bit more, maybe halfway down. Says the Gemara, 100% correct. Great question. And the answer to your question, why is our Mishnah talking about exceptions to Eidim Zomimin, is because it's continuing from a Mishnah that we learned in Maseches Sanhedrin. Tana Hasam Kai. The author of our Mishnah he just finished up learning Maseches Sanhedrin yesterday. And there was a Mishnah, not in Perek Chelek, but a little bit earlier. It was in Sanhedrin Daf Peites. What did the Mishnah say there? Well, let's see, halfway down. Kol hazomamin makdim le'osamisa. Whenever Eidim, they lied in their testimony to try and get punishment X to go to Chaim, then they get punishment X instead. Chut, with the exception of mizomamei bas kohen uvoala, the zomamei of a bas kohen and the man that she cohabited with, she'ein makdim le'osamisa ela lemisa acheres, there they don't get that punishment. And there are other Eidim, like the ones in our Mishnah, who are Eidim Zomimin, but they don't get the punishment at all. Ela Malkos Arbaim. That's our Mishnah. Oh, Ketzad. Then our Mishnah comes in, and in this iteration of the Gemara of our Mishnah, it doesn't say Ketzad Ha'edim Nasin Zomimin. It just says Ketzad, and the Gemara says Me'idin Anu Beish Ploni Shu Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza. Ein Omer Miyaseh Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza Tachtav Ela Lokes Harbaim. Beautiful. So the Gemara was bothered. Why did our Mishnah start off so weird? Why did it start off saying with the exceptions? That's not how you teach things. First, teach the basic case scenario and then go on to the what ifs and all the different scenarios. Says the Gemara, it is structured that way. The Mishnah on Peites and Sanhedrin taught us the basic din of Hazama. And then our Mishnah says, here are some of the exceptions. And that's why our Mishnah flows the way that it does. Asks the Gemara 8 lines from the bottom of the page on Beis Med Aleph Minani Mili. How do we know that this Kohen, that we tried to get him to be a Chalal, that I, the Eid Zomeim, don't get the punishment I tried to give to him, even though the Mishnah in Sanhedrin taught us that Makdim Le'osamisa. It should be that whatever I try to give to the guy, even though I'm lying, whatever I try to give to him, I should get. It should be that way. But there are exceptions. Why by Kohen is there an exception? So we have 2 answers. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi de Amar Kro ve'asisem lo kasher zamam lo v'lo lezaro. Well, if I make someone into a chalal with my testimony, not only is he a chalal, but all of his descendants are chalalim also. It completely shatters the line of the kahuna. But that's not true over here, because if I'm the liar, if I'm the Eid Zomim, and you turn me into a chalal, it makes all of my children into Eidim Zomimin. So says the Gemara, that's totally unreasonable, because it's not even true. It's not just what I'm doing to that guy, it's also what I'm doing to his kids, and therefore to me and to my kids. You can't just give me the consequence because it affects my children. So therefore it doesn't work. Says the Gemara, why? Let's make a unique din. That if I try to make a Kohen into a Chalal, then let's say by me, as the Eid Zomim, I should still be punished as a Chalal. Okay, so let's make a unique din, that I, the Eid Zomim, get this punishment, but it doesn't apply to my children. Says the Gemara, you can't do that. And the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words that we're going to learn are so fundamental for the Masechta. It teaches us such a basic principle about Hazama. Bo'inan kasher zamam lasos vileka. What we need in order to be able to mete out the punishments of Hazama, what we need in order for an Eid Zomim to get exactly the punishment, to be makdim la'osa misa, to give him the exact punishment, is that the punishment is exact. And that can't be with Eid Zomim. That can't be in the case of a Kohen, because what I do to a Kohen is I make him a Chalal and ruin all of his children. Well, what should happen with me? It's me and all of my children. But my children literally didn't do anything. The punishment of Hazama needs to be equivalent in both cases. It's not fair for me to do that to my kids as an Eid Zomim. Therefore, if there's no Kasher Zamam, I need a different punishment, and therefore it's going to be Makkos. That's the answer. That's answer number one of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, is that we have a pasuk. However, we have another answer that's going to get rejected. Says the Gemara 4 lines from the bottom of the page, Bar Pada Omer, he says, Kal v'chomer. This is a difficult piece of Gemara, but a beautiful Rashi to help explain. Bar Pada Omer, Kal v'chomer. Uma ha-mechalel eino mischalel. Just like the one who was mechalel, he doesn't become mechalel. Rashi, beautiful Rashi. Rashi says, ha-mechalel eino mischalel. Just like the mechalel, a kohen hanoseas hagrusha shemechalel is zaro, but ein hu atzmo mischalel min hakahuna. I know people who've done this, kohanim, who've married women who are grushos. What happens to the man who marries the woman? He doesn't become a chalal. Who becomes a chalal? Just his children. So says the Gemara. If the guy who caused all these problems, the Kohen dad, who marries the grusha woman from another marriage, the Kohen doesn't become a mechalel. He's not a chalal. So then, habal lechalel v'lo chilel, then the Eidim Zomim who tried to make someone into a chalal, eino din shelo yischalel. All the more so, we should say that this Eid Zomim should not become a chalal. But the Gemara picks up on a very fundamental, subtle aspect of this argument, which is that it's a never-ending argument, and it uproots the whole idea of Eid Zomim. Maskif la Ravina. Ravina asks, Im Kain, if your logic is true that you just said, that just like the Kohen who married the Grusha, the Mechalel is not Mischalel, so too the Eid Zomim should not become a Chalal. If that's true, Im Kain, but Bitalta Torah's Eidim Zomim. You've ruined the whole principle of Eidim Zomim. Why is that? Let's turn to the top of Beis Amid Beis. Mirza Hashem will be getting to the Mishnah on Gimel Amid Aleph, and then we'll pause. Then you can get back to your B'dikas comments. Sorry for interrupting. Says the Gemara, and this Gemara we're about to read is a machlokes Rashi Tosfos as to how to interpret it. It is a difficult piece of Gemara according to Rashi. It is difficult in Tosfos also. So it says the Gemara, Uma hasokel eino niskal haba liskol velo sakal eino din shelo yisakel. What does this mean? Let's take a look at Rashi. Uma hasokel eino niskal edim. Let's say I'm Reuven and Shimon, and I give my testimony about someone, and I say he's a killer, and they kill him because of me. And only then is it found out that I'm an Eid Zomim. Again, Rashi says in that case, then I, the Eid Zomim, are not Nerag. So the problem with this is that you can always use a logic like that. Well, yeah, but I didn't actually do the crime that he did. Yeah, I'm not exactly equal. And then if you keep using that line of reasoning, then you've completely uprooted the whole concept of Eidim Zomim. And Ella says the Gemara, it is Gzeres HaKasuv. That's answer number one, is Gzeres HaKasuv. Bar Pada's answer is a Kal V'chomer. But its Kal V'chomer has a slippery slope effect of always applying in every case of Eidim Zomim. And therefore, there's no application of Eidim Zomim. That's why he's wrong. That's why the Gemara says right now on the second line, because Bar Pada's answer is a Kal V'chomer that has a slippery slope application, it can apply almost everywhere. Now you've unraveled all of Eidim Zomim, so he has to be wrong. And therefore we fall back, like text is saying on the Gzeres HaKasuv, of like the pasuk says, "V'asisem lo kasher zamam lo velo lazaro." It can only, the punishment only is able to apply to the Eid Zomim. But if it's the type of punishment that had it applied to the victim, it would have affected his children, then I, as the Eid Zomim, can't get that punishment. I wanted the Kohen to become a Chalal, which affects his children. That can't happen to me as an Eid Zomim. I can't have a punishment that affects my children. It can only affect me. And therefore, we hold like the first approach of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and not like Bar Pada. And that brings us to the 2 dots, 3 lines down on Beis Amid Beis. Says the Gemara, we had said in our Mishnah, We had said in our Mishnah that there was a case of if I testify that Chaim was a murderer by accident, accidental murder, and he has to go into Galus, we said that that doesn't apply to the Eid Zomim. If I try to mete out that punishment, I don't get that punishment in return. I don't go to Galus. Minahanimili. Here too we see two answers. The second one will be rejected. Amar Reish Lakish to Amar Kra, Hu Yanus el Achas Ha'arim. Look at that first word, Hu Yanus. He will run to one of those cities. Namely, the pasuk teaches us that if a person kills B'shogeg, he has to go to an Ir Miklad. Look at the drasha. Who only the guy who's actually guilty of killing B'shogeg goes to an Ir Miklad. Who? V'lo Zomim. Gzeras HaKasuv. It's not logical necessarily. There's an extra word who. It could have just said that guy didn't have to say this word. It said who. Okay. Therefore, it only applies to the person who's actually guilty and not to Eidim Zomim. Rav Yochanan says, no, Kal V'chomer. He says, I have a different svara as to why an Eid Zomim would never go to an Ir Miklat. Umahu she'asa ma'aseh b'mezid eino goleh. That guy, if a person murders not by accident, he murders on purpose. So what happened? When does a person go to an Ir Miklat? That's only if they kill b'shogeg. If a person kills on purpose, voluntary manslaughter, he doesn't go to an Ir Miklat. He has no protection. Bezdin's going to kill him. So says the Gemara, if a person who killed on purpose doesn't go to Galus, Hein, the Eidim Zomamin, Shalo Asu Ma'aseh b'mezid, they didn't do a hands-on act. I know the language here is a little difficult because it says b'mezid. Here, they only spoke, they only did dibur. So then, Eino din Shalo Yiglu? The Gemara says, this Kal V'chomer makes no sense at all. V'hi anosenes. The logic that you just gave, Rav Yochanan, flips your argument on its head and would make you wrong. Why? V'halo dinhu. Who she'asa ma'aseh b'mezid lo ligli? Why is it that if a person kills intentionally, that they don't go to an Ir Miklat? Ki heichi delo tehava lekapara. Because if someone kills b'shogeg and they end up in an Ir Miklat, the punishment matches the crime, and he'll get kapara for being there. However, if a person kills intentionally, execution style, so his crime is up here, but going to an Ir Miklat is not kapara, it's too small of a consequence. So says the Gemara, Hein, 9 lines down or so, Bezim and Bez, Hein, the Eidim Zomamin, Shelo Asu Ma'aseh b'mezid, Nami lo leglu, ki heichi de lehavelu kapara. But what the Eidim Zomamin did was less than a murder even b'shogeg. So that's also not a reasonable match. What is a reasonable match to Ir Miklat? Killing b'shogeg. The guy who kills b'mezid, the punishment doesn't match the crime. The guy who's an Eid Zomim, his punishment also doesn't match the crime. That's Rav Yochanan's, what he tried to say was a svara, but we reject that. So therefore, says the Gemara as follows, Ela machvarta k'deresh Lakish, and that is end of Sugya number 2 that we just saw, maybe Sugya number 3. And that's what the Gemara says, is that we hold like the opinion of Reish Lakish. What is the reason why Eidim Zomim would never be sent to Galus? The reason why is because of the pasuk, Hu Yanus el Achas Ha'arim. And we're a quarter of the way down. The next chunk of Gemara is an easy one. Amar Ula, Remez la'edim zomamin min ator minayin. Where do we see a hint to Eidim Zomamin in the Torah? Asks the Gemara incredulously, Remez la'edim zomamin. I don't need a hint. V'haksiv, v'asisem lo kasher zomam. The pasuk is express and explicit. Why are you asking me what is the hint of Eidim Zomamin? That's like saying, Breshis bara Elokim es Hashemayim. Where's a remez that Hashem created? No, it's an open pasuk. So why are you asking this odd question, Gemara? Why are you saying where's the hint to Eidim Zomamin? It's open. It's an open pasuk. And the Gemara says you're right, 100%. I didn't mean that. So what then did the Gemara mean? So what did Ula mean? Ela remez la'edim zomamin shelokin minator minayin. Give me a mare makom that teaches me when or why I should say that an Eid Zomim would ever get Makkos. So the Gemara says, Dichsiv. We have a couple of psukim, one after the other. V'tztiku es hatzadik v'yirshiu es harasha. That in a court case, if the righteous person is found to be acquitted, and the rasha is found guilty, and then the next pasuk says, V'yayim bina kos harasha. Then there will be Makkos for the rasha, says the Gemara. Mishum v'tztiku es hatzadik v'yirshiu es harasha. Then v'yayim bina kos harasha. Mechatesi, that it should be Makkos. If the guilty guy is found guilty, who says it's Makkos? Maybe he killed and he should be killed. Maybe it's kares and you should get kares. Maybe it's chai b'dei shamayim and not chai b'dei adam. 100 possibilities. But who says that it's malkos? So the Gemara says a third of the way down, 4 lines before the wide lines, 3 lines actually. Ella says the Gemara, here is what the psukim mean. Eidim shehirshiu es hatzadik. The witnesses who were Eidim Zomim, they were Rishoim about a tzaddik. V'asu Eidim Achrini v'tzdiku es hatzadik. So the first pair of Eidim were Rishoim, they're Hirshiu es hatzadik. The next pair of Eidim was Hitzdiku es hatzadik because the second pair of Eidim invalidated the first pair of Eidim. They found the first pair to be Zomimin. Then Hitzdiku es hatzadik the Meikara. The Shavinu Lahani Rishoim and the first pair of Eidim were Taka Rishoim. Then what is their punishment? V'yoyim bina kosa rasha. The pashtus of the pasuk is not that way, but the way we need to learn the pasuk is that way, and therefore we have a Mari Makom. Ask the Gemara a very important principle, one that is a Shas principle. I look at the Aseres Hadibros. We have the 10 Commandments. V'teipu kleimi losane. The pasuk reads, Lo sirtzach, lo sin'af, v'chulev, lo sa'an never echad shaker. You're not allowed to give false testimony. So why don't we say that the reason we know there's malkos by Eidim Zomimim is because they lied and they violated the Isser of lo saneh? That's a great Mari Makom. So answers the Gemara, no. Mishum dehavalav she'ein bo ma'isa. Because lo sa'aneh, the act of giving false testimony, is considered to be a lav, an isser, that has no action associated with it. It's not like eating treif. It's not like bruising someone, whatever the mice is that you're doing. And v'cholav shein bo ma'isa ein lokin alav. That whenever we have a lav that has no action attached to it, that can't be malkos. So therefore, we fall back on our first Mari Makom, that really it's based on the pasuk of Hitztiku es hatzadik and Hirshiu es harasha v'ayim bina kos harasha. That's how we know that there's ever a case of Eidim Zomimim that have malkos. Halfway down, 2 lines into the wide lines, Tanu Rabbanan. Dalad Dvarim Namru be'Eidim Zomimim. There were 4 things that were stated about Eidim Zomimim. Number 1, Einas and Ben Grusha ben Chalutza, like we saw in the first case of our Mishnah, that the Eidim Zomimim will never become a Chalal. We also saw Ve'in Golan La'arei Miklad. They would never go to an Ir Miklat because the pasuk says Hu Yanus. Ve'in Mishalman es HaKofer. He will never pay the kofer. Take a look at Rashi to see what the case is. Rashi's 2/3 of the way down. Dibur HaMaschil ve'ein Mishalman kofer. And Rashi explains. Im hei'idu b'shor hamuad sheharag es ha'adam. Ruvain's shore killed Shimon. That was at least what was claimed in court. V'huz move hayu mechayven es habaylim kofer. And kofer was to be paid. The Eidim Zomimim don't pay that. And the next case, ve'enim karm be'eved ivri. As well, if the Eidim Zomimim were to give testimony that someone stole, and the person was found guilty, but because he didn't have enough money, as we've seen earlier in Shas, he therefore has to become an eved to the Adon, to the person who he owes money to. Ve'enim karm be'eved ivri, that an Eid Zomim will never get that consequence. He'll never have to be subjugated to that. And let's learn all the cases right. We'll learn all the cases why in a moment, but our Brisa said there were 4. This one might be a 5th. Mishum Rabbi Akiva Omer, halfway down, 4 lines into the wide lines. Afein mishalmin al pi atzman. If they admit, if the Eid Zomim admits, he does not have to, he does not get any punishment either. He doesn't get the Eid Zomim punishment at least. Let's go through all of them. Says the Gemara, Ein nasin ben grusho ben chalutza kede amra. Like we had already said on the previous page, he cannot become a ben grusha ben chalutza because that was the answer that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi had said to Amar Akra v'asisam lo kasher zama, that it has to be a punishment that's limited to the Eid Zomim, and in the case of Chalal, the punishment is not limited to an Eid Zomim. So that explains that case, Kida Amran. And ve'ein golan la'arei miklad, we learned on the top of this page that if an Eid Zomim were to give testimony that Ruvain killed Shimon b'shogeg and Ruvain needs to go to Galus, and then we find out the Eidim Zomim don't go to Galus. Why not? Because we saw the pasuk earlier, Hu Yanus, Kida Amran. Ve'ein mishalmen es kofer. Why is it that an Eid Zomim who gets caught, why wouldn't they pay kofer? If Ruvain's shore killed Shimon, why wouldn't he pay kofer? Ruvain would have had to pay kofer. So now they're Eidim Zomim, so let Yisachar and Zvulun with Eidim Zomim pay. Why not? Because says the Gemara, ve'ein mishalman es kofer kasabre kufra kapara. The kofer is a kapara. V'hani la bnei kaparninu. It's not a regular onesh. It's a type of onesh that's called a kapara. It has 0 applicability to an Eid Zomim. It's not an onesh. It's not a typical onesh that we would say that we're just going to give over that punishment over to the Eid Zomim. We can't, because kufra is kapara. How do we know this to be true? Or I should say more accurately, who holds this way? Man tana kufra kapara. Rav Chizda responds, it's Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher of Yochanan ben Baroka. Rav Chizda, of course in Amora, he says that it was the Tana, Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher of Yochanan ben Baroka. Where do we see this? Titania. V'nosan pidyon nafsho. The pasuk says that in such a case where Ruvain's animal kills Shimon, he has to pay pidyon nafsho. So the Tanakama holds. How does he measure? Dmei nizak. He measures based on the one that was damaged, right? The damagee. Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher of Yochanan ben Baroka Omer Dmei mazik. If Ruvain's animal kills Shimon, so then Ruvain is the mazik. He has to pay, and he has to pay based on himself, on his own mazik status. My lab kamiflagi. Maybe this is what they're arguing about. Demar savar kufra mamona. According to the Tanakama, who says that it's Dmei Nizak, he holds that we measure based on the damage that was done. It's just a mamonis shaila. How much damage did I cause? This is how much I'll pay you. Umar savar kufra kapara. And the other one says, Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher of Yochanan ben Baroka holds that it's not about the nizak, it's about the mazik needing kapara. And because it's about the mazik needing kapara, we assess what Reuven has to pay based on the animal of the mazik, not the animal of the nizak, because kufra is kapara. So perhaps we should say that's the machlokes between them, and that really the one who holds that kufra is kapara is Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher of Yochanan ben Baroka. Says the Gemara, no. Amar Rav Papa lo. You've misunderstood their machlokes. The Tanakama and Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher of Yochanan ben Baroka are not arguing about whether or not kufra is mamon or kufra is kapara. The kule alma kufra kapara. Everyone agrees it's kapara, that the mazik needs kapara for what he did. So when he pays, he says, my animal killed your animal. How much was my animal? And I'm going to pay you. Everyone agrees kufra kapara. The hachabal kamiflagi. Yes, kufra is kapara, and the mazik needs kapara. What do we pay to make sure the mazik gets kapara? Mar savar b'denizak shayminon. The Tanakama held that what Ruvain pays is based on the cost of the animal of the nizak. Umar savar b'demazik shayminon. And Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher of Yochanan ben Baroka holds that no, we've just based it based on what the mazik costs. That's what the machlokes is. So the Gemara then asks, "My tamayu derabanan." What's the reason that the rabbis hold, namely that the Tanakama holds, that when the pasuk says "V'nasan pidyon nafsho," 5 lines above us, that we say Dmei Nizak? Because says the Gemara, we have 2 psukim, we have a little bit of a gzeira shava. Nemar hashasa lemata, nemar hashasa lemala. We have this word yushas or yashis in different psukim. And one of them is talking about, let's just pull the pasuk over here. One of them says, "Im kofer yushas alav." That was the case we spoke about earlier, the case of kofer. And v'ne'emar hashasa lemala. And in another pasuk, both of them in Shmos, the first one in Shmos Kaf, and this one's in Shmos Kaf Aleph, it says that im kofer v'chinatzu anashim v'nagfu isha hara v'yatzu yiladeha. If there's fighting and I'm fighting against someone and a woman gets punched and she loses a child, v'lo yeh ason. So the pasuk says, "Lo yason anosh enesh kasher yashi salah." We have the similar language in both. And malahalan b'denizak. Just like over there in the pasuk where they injured the woman, we measure based on the nizak. That's why our Tanakama says Afkan b'denizak. I've Rabbi Shmuel. That's a beautiful svara. What about the Kal V'chomer of Hashasa? Rabbi Shmuel says, don't worry. The Nasan pidyon nafsho ksiv. We said in the pasuk expressly that he needs a pidyon nefesh. Who is that? That's Ruvain, the guy whose animal killed Shimon's animal. Ruvain needs a pidyon nefesh. What are you going to do about the psukim? I understand what you're saying. I just disagree with you. Oh, that's a great question. What did the Rabbanan do about the pasuk? Says the Gemara, 100% right. Pidyon nefesh ksiv. I agree that he needs a pidyon nefesh. I'm not disagreeing. The mazik needs to have kapara. However, mihu ki shayminan b'den nizak shayminan. All of this was the discussion around the fact that Edim Zomamin never get the punishment of kofar. And the case would be if Ruvain's animal, well, I'm an Eid Zomim, so I'm a liar. If I give false testimony that Ruvain's animal killed Shimon, and I need to pay kofar, and then I'm found out to be an Eid Zomim, then I don't have to pay that. Let's continue with the next case. We're about 10 lines or so from the bottom of Beis Amud Beis, says the Gemara. Ve'enim karim be'eved ivri. We also said that if the Eidim Zomamin gave false testimony that Ruvain was a Ganav and he stole money from Chaim, but Ruvain has no money, now he should become an Eved to pay off what he owes, an Eved to Chaim. So we said that doesn't apply to Eidim Zomamin. Now we have to figure out some of the parameters as to whether or not that's true. Savar Rav Hamnuna Lameimar. Rav Hamnuna wanted to say the following svara. Hani mili hecha de islay ledidei. When do we say that the Eidim Zomamin don't have the punishment of becoming an Eved to the Baal? That's when Ruvain, the person who they said was a thief, he has money. But because he has money, he wouldn't become an Eved. So to Ihunami, in Hunami, the Eidim Zomamin also lo mizdavnu. They also wouldn't be sold into servitude. Aval, but perhaps, says Rav Hamnuna, but if Ruvain, who they claimed was a thief, really was destitute and he's going to become an Eved, then afal gab de isla mizdavnu. So if I make a claim against Ruvain stole, I'm a liar, Ruvain stole, and Ruvain really had no money, and Ruvain, in theory, would have become an Eved to Chaim, then that's what should happen to the Eidim Zomamin, even if they do have money, because Mikaiman, we want to try and fulfill the punishment as they tried to do. So that's what he says. But Amarle Rava, you can't say that. Maybe even Amarle Rabba. But though they could argue, if you have money, mihavan mizdavnis, if you would have had money, we wouldn't have been sold. So anonami lo mizdavnina, because we have money. So that none of that works. We reject that whole svara. Ella, says the Gemara. How then do we understand Rav Hamnuna? Ella Saba Rav Hamnuna, we're 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Saba Rav Hamnuna Lemeimar. Hani Mili, when is it that we say that the Eidim Zomamin don't get sold into slavery after they make a claim that Ruvain the Ganav has no money and he should be put into slavery? Hani Mili heicha de islay oladidei oladidhu. If either the person, the defendant that I come to court and lie about, Ruvain, I say this guy really is a Ganav and he owes money to Chaim and he's poor. So if he has no money, or if I have no money, so then I think I skipped. That's heicha de islay. Let me just start from the beginning, just to be super clear. Elasavar of Hamnuna Lameimar hani mili heicha de islay oladidei oladidu. When is it that the Eidim Zomamin are not sold into servitude? That's if either Ruvain or the Eidim have money. They should be sold into slavery. That's what it seems like from Rav Hamnuna. Says the Gemara, no. Amarle Rava, the Nimkar Bignei Vaso, Amar Achmana. The pasuk says that it's Nimkar Bignei Vaso, that if a person runs out of money, he needs to be sold into servitude. What is the drasha? Bignei Vaso, velo bizmamo. Says the Gemara, it's all a Gzeras HaKosuv in this case. Let's review this final case so far, and that is as follows. The Gemara teaches us in a Brisa that if there is an Eid Zomem who tries to claim, he falsely claims that Ruvain stole from Chaim, and Ruvain is so poor he gets sold into servitude to Chaim, says the Gemara, that punishment will never be given over to an Eid Zomem. Why not? Because of the Gzeras HaKosuv, v'nimkar bignei vasa, marachmana bignei vasa, v'lo bizmama. That Eidim Zomem never earn that punishment. Let's learn the 5th possibility. It was an addition to the Mishnah, or the Brisa. The Brisa said there were 4 cases where Eidim Zomim would not get their punishment. Here's the possible 5th. Mishum Rabbi Akiva Amru, he had said if they admit it, that they're going to be patur. Let's see what that case is. My time with Rabbi Akiva, why does he hold that way? Because Savar, he holds that the punishment of an Eid Zomim is knasahu. The knas ein mishalem al pi atzmo. This is a deep lumdus, and we don't have time to unpack this. But he holds that the lumdus behind Eidim Zomamin is very simple. It is that it is a knas. And whenever there is a knas, we have a principle in Shas, mode b'knas pater. And therefore, if the Eid Zomim is mode that he owes money, because Rabbi Akiva holds it to knas, therefore he's going to be completely pater. And Amar Rabba, he concurs with this. Teda, you should know this is true. Shaharei, even though it's true that lo asumaisa, even though it's true that in general Eidim Zomamin don't do an action, still the nehergenu mishalmin, we still normally give out punishments. but not when it's a knas. So if he's modeh, he's going to be pater. And Amar Rav Nachman, similarly, teda, we'll see soon that this was a duplicative comment. Last line of Beis Amid Beis, finishing our first blot of the Masechta. Shaharei mamon biyad bailim u'mishalmin. He says money's in the hands of the owners, and still they're going to pay. Meaning, if I claim that you stole, you never stole. Money never changed hands. I'm a liar. I'm an Eid Zomim. I'm a liar. Money never changed hands, but I still have to pay. Says the Gemara, thank you very much. But we already had Rabbah. Why, Rav Nachman, did you need to add your comment on the last line? So says the Gemara on the top of Gimel Amid Aleph, my nihu. Says the Gemara, what exactly are you talking about? Says the Gemara, I'm just highlighting Delo Asumaisa. I'm just saying that the Edim Zomim didn't do anything, and they're still being punished. Says the Gemara, yes. Very good, but Hainu de Rabbah, I agree with you, but we just had that a second ago from Rabbah. And you guys lived in the same third generation of Amorim, you should know that already. Why are you repeating yourself? So says the Gemara, you're 100% right. No chiddush in Rabbah. Ema, v'chein, Amar Rav Nachman. We're going to learn one more little sugya, and then we'll stop for the night. We'll be stopping at the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Amar Yehuda Marav. This is cryptic. Eid Zomem mishalim lefi chelko. An Eid Zomem has to pay his portion. What in the world does that mean? My mishalim lefi chelko. What does that mean? Ilema dehai mishalim palga b'hai mishalim palga. If you want to say that each of them pay their own portions, of course they do. Mishal shalin tanina. We learned this already. Mishal shalin b'mamon, vein mishal shalin b'malkos. They each pay equal portions. Thank you very much. Ella, no, that's not what Rabbi Yehuda meant. When Rabbi Yehuda Rav said, Eid Zomim Mishalim Lefi Chelko, he meant Kigon de Is Zum Chad Minahu. That only one of the two, I testified with text, I testified with him, and they only caught me as an Eid Zomim. Phil, Imanu Hayisem Behawaii, you couldn't have possibly been an Eid. So maybe it's only me, the Mishalim Pal Gadidei. I only pay the portion that is due to me. Text was never found to be an Eid Zomim. Says the Gemara, no, in such a case where only one Eid is found to be an Eid Zomim, Umi Mishalim Vatanya. We have a brisa that we will see, or that we've seen already, I should say, in Chagiga. Ein Eid Zomim Mishalim Mamon Ad She'azumu Shnehem. There is no Eidim Zomim without two people. Only incriminating me as an Eid Zomim is meaningless. I'm not a nice guy, but I don't pay what I would normally pay. I don't pay my portion, so that can't be what Rav meant, because there is no paying your portion. So again, Rabbi Yehuda Rav said, Eid Zomim Mishalim Lefi Chelko. What is he talking about? So let's try approach number 3. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Be'omer Edu Sheker He'adati. Let's say that I admit that I lied. Oh, so if I admit that I lied, maybe I should pay the portion that I tried to get you to pay. Says the Gemara, no dice. Kol Kimine, Rashi says, Bitmia? Absolutely not. Rashi beautifully articulates, I can go back and change my own testimony? No way. Look back in the Gemara. Once I have given my testimony, kaviyachol, hand on the Bible, it's not how we do it, but you get the point. Shuv eino chozeru magid. You are absolutely not allowed to go back and change your testimony. So again, we still don't know what Rav meant when he said, Eid Zomim Mishalim Lefi Chelko. And now let's try our fourth and final attempt. Ela be'omer he'adnu v'huzamnu b'vezdin ploni. Fourth and not final. Actually, we're going to have a fifth. This is what I claim. I'm an Eid Zomim. I already testified and became an Eid Zomim in another bezdin. So says the Gemara, that's great. But why then would you be Mishalim in this case? Kiman, Dilo Rabbi Akiva. Rav would never go against Rabbi Akiva if we paskin like him. What does Rabbi Akiva hold? Rabbi Akiva ha'amar af eina mishalim al pi atzmo. If I knew in the last bezdin that I was an Eid Zomim, and I'm in this case, I'm pater anyways. Ella, says the Gemara, and this is in fact the final answer. Be'omer, what did I, as one of the two Eidim Zomim, claim? He'adnu v'huzamnu bevezdin ploni v'chuyavnu mamon. Ah, here's what it means. I'm in a new case of Azama. I'm in a new case. Today's April 10th. We're mamish, the 13th of the month of Nisan. We're on the fence here. It says the Gemara, what's going on here? Not on the 13th. Last month, on the 13th of Adar, they told me that I was chayav mamanis, and that's what I have to pay. So it says, yeah. I mean, if a previous bezdin says you're chayav, pashut that you'd have to pay. So it says the Gemara, no. Sal kadai techamina. Kevan de lachavre lo matzi mechayev. Since in this case, I can't be mechayev my friend. Therefore, ihu nami lo mechayev, maybe I should also be pater, kamash malan. That was the chiddush of the case of Rabbi Yehuda Mar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda Mar Rav wanted to say the Meshalim Lefi Chelko, what was the case where that was true? That's where he was already found as an individual that he's chayav to pay mammon. So we're going to stop right here at the Mishnah, halfway down on Gimel Amud Aleph. Emir Hashem will pick up on Shabbos, the real Shabbos Hagadol. We'll pick up together as a Chabura with the continuation of Maseches Makkos. We'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.